monetary policy and fiscal policy are demand management policies. These two. So the government implements either monetary policy, fiscal policy, or both to increase countries' aggregate demand, means total demand, persuade, stimulate countries' aggregate demand, or else government will cut down aggregate demand by implementing these two policies. Both monetary policy and fiscal policy are short-term and somewhat effective policy measures. As well as monetary policy includes two instruments: rate of interest and money supply. Rate of interest and money supply is controlled time to time in order to achieve government targets, as we discussed before. So then, central bank in Sri Lanka implements monetary policy on behalf of the government. In certain cases, rate of interest and money supply, sometimes exchange rate, are changed in order to boost aggregate demand, sometimes to reduce aggregate demand. We will learn separately in future lessons how to achieve their objectives one by one. The government and central bank use monetary policy to determine size and rate of money supply, as it affects the rate of interest, exchange rate, and price and income levels of a country. Money supply and interest rate are the main tools of monetary policy. Then the next one, fiscal policy. Fiscal policy also two instruments. One is taxes, other one is government spending. Actually, government implements fiscal policy by coordinating its budget. Government has a budget. It's a particular plan what they are going to do in future. So budget implies clearly what kind of expenses and what kind of income that the government intend to implement. So fiscal policy concentrate those. So it says here, steps are taken to change government revenue, government expenditure, and government debt through this policy. Decisions taken with regard to government expenditure, taxation, and government debt are considered as fiscal policy measures. Then the supply side. Here, aggregate demand is controlled. Then the aggregate supply can be seen over here. Countries' aggregate supply should be promoted, or countries' productive capacity should be increased time to time. If the country has sufficient capital stock, production will rise. Then the price level will go down and many other objectives can be achieved. So supply side measures, supply side policies are very helpful. So supply side policies are designed to enhance the productive capacities of a country. Thus, aggregate supply. These policies are aimed to improving quality and quantity of factor of production, and tools such as privatization, deregulation, and tax reforms are employed towards this. So supply side measures. Then the next policy, these are direct policies actually. Income policy. So the government can use particular methods to control wage rate, price level. Here it says, policies used by the government to control economy-wide escalation in wage rates, and price levels, mainly to curb inflationary pressures in the economy. So they will change wage rates, sometimes price level, to focus their objectives. Then the foreign trade policy, taking action to influence free international trade known as foreign trade policy. Tax, tariff, export subsidy, import quota, manipulation of exchange rate are such tools employed towards achieving favorable balance of trade. So number of policy measures are used to tackle balance of payment objective, equilibrium, sometimes high taxes. It is called tariff. Sometimes subsidies are given for exported products. Even imported goods are controlled, like quota. Even exchange rate changes, variety of things to cut down or the balance of payment. Direct control, measures taken by the government to intervene free market. Policies aimed at controlling ownership and distribution of resources, and also price determined through market forces are considered as direct control. So in here, they do concentrate such a direct focus. They consider such a direct control. The government wants to reduce income inequality through particular policy measures. Right. After that, we do consider business cycle. Actually, economy should have a growth. Growth means a persistent rise in countries' output. In certain cases, they do not have a persistent improvement. Earlier, I showed you a particular format of the central bank report, from the central bank report. It says from 2016 to 2020, rapid fall, like changes in output, but countries do not expect. It is unexpected event. Anyways, such actual changes are considered by using business cycle. We didn't have such a what you call trend in last years. I mean, before 2016, sometimes growth, sometimes decline, growth, variety of fluctuations. All the fluctuations are discussed under business cycle or economic cycle, right? So it says the upward and downward movement, like fluctuations of real GDP, means output that the economy produces for a period of time, are known as business cycle. So vertical axis, GDP, means total production. GDP means total production. Here, horizontal axis, time. We expect this kind of progress. It is called potential growth or potential GDP. Actually, country doesn't receive such a growth. In some period, very high. Some period, very low than we expected. Sometimes again rises, falls, like fluctuations. These fluctuations around potential GDP or potential growth is referred to as business cycle. Right. So when we look at this business cycle, we will come across 4 periods. One is peak, means a very high output than we expected. Even here, peak. And here down, it is rough. If not, we can say slump, another term slump or rough. In here, also the same point. And output falls from peak to trough, in other words, slump. It is that such a period is called recession. Declining period, another name for this, recession. Once again, some through the trough to peak. growth. It is a growth or recovery. Growth or recovery. These are 4 periods: peak, recession, slump, growth. These are the 4 periods of a business cycle. So it says here, prolonged increase in output are called economic expansion or economic boom. Similarly, a fall in its output is known as economic downturn. A fall in the period of time, period of more than 6 months, recession. If the output falls more than 6 months, it is called a recession. Considered an economic downturn. Economic downturn takes a short term, but economic expansion takes a long term. Like expansion means once again growth. So there are 4 distinct phases of business cycle. They are peak. This is also called boom. The period boom. Decline stage, depression. Also we can say recession. Here trough, we can say slump. Here stage, expanding stage, or else expansion, if not growth. Sometimes recovery. Right. These are similar words for each and every stage. As well as these periods should be studied separately. All these stages imply the impact of the country's output and the variables what we identified before. So the period in which real GDP declines considers a recession, and production and employment declines during this period. So employment falls during such a period. Economic downturn. So here just I mentioned. I take boom and recession, say growth together. There are 4 periods. Slump as well as recession. Right. This is compulsory to memorize. So boom, we can say high aggregate demand. Then other side, low aggregate demand, AAT abbreviation. Then the high investment. As well as their low investment. So this side, high employment. Then low employment. As well as there is a inflationary pressure. Inflationary pressures. This side, deflationary pressures. Even government has less spending in this period, but other side government has high spending. Likewise, certain things can be recognized. So it says here known as The trough is known as the lowest point of the trade. The peak of the expansion stage is at the top, and the period from the trough to a peak of the economic process is known as expansion phase. Potential output is determined by resources and effectiveness of that resources owned by the economy. The potential output level indicates the long-term economic growth behavior of the economy. The potential level of production is the real GDP produced when all the resources of the economy are utilized to the fullest and maximum efficiency. That is, potential output indicates that maximum output level of the economy. The difference between actual output and potential output is called output gap. Here we do the consider output gap between actual level and the potential level. Just I will show you. And the economic stabilization is a reduction in economic gap reaching the level of potential output. The macroeconomic policies used to do so are referred to as macroeconomic policies. So here gaps from here to this point. This is called negative output gap. Actually, we expected such a greater level, but really we received lower, therefore negative output gap. And here positive output gap. We expected low, but we reach greater, therefore here a positive output gap. So negative output gap and positive output gap can be seen due to these changes, I mean the gaps between potential GDP and the real GDP, simply expected output and the actual output that the economy reached. Right, this is the lesson what we are supposed to do today. Right, we'll start the next session in next time.